Now, Audrey Young from the New Zealand Herald has been looking at quite a controversial topic, need over race. It's the ACT Party leader David Seymour's mantra. But when you look at how government policy is implemented, it can be a little bit confusing. Funding for Māori-focused schools appears fine, yet the Māori Health Authority was disestablished. Specific funding for Māori housing programs and Māori trades training were cut in Budget 2025, but funding for Māori wardens was increased through whānau order. Senior political correspondent Audrey Young sat down with the Deputy Prime Minister to get to the bottom of all of this. Take a look.
Is it okay to target Māori in social policy, and if so, when?
I don't think it is okay, but I can accept it in line with the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, which basically says you should not discriminate against a person based on their race unless there is absolutely no other way to deal with an inequity. Now, I would argue that most of the time in New Zealand we say that there's an inequity between Māori and Pākehā, but in saying that you have already chosen to categorise people primarily by their ancestry or their race. Once you dig into it, you find that things like nutrition, living urban or rural, income, smoking. There's lots of other reasons why people have different life expectancies. For example, if you believe that it's all about colonisation, you have to be able to explain why Asians live longer than European New Zealanders. Is that because they are colonising European New Zealanders? I wouldn't think so. So my point is that grouping people by their ancestry should be your last resort. There are often much more useful ways to understand differences amongst groups of people. And the thing about if it's nutrition, if it's rural location, if it's tobacco use or whatever, you can actually do stuff about those things. Whereas if your explanation for health inequity is something that happened 200 years ago, there's not much you can do about that.
Now, Ella Henry is an AUT professor specialising in sociology, business and Māori Indigenous development, and she's with me at the desk this morning. Ella Morena, good morning.
Kia ora.
Good to have you on the program. Listening to David Seymour there, he says if you keep blaming colonisation for everything, we won't actually get anywhere. There are other reasons why you have disparities in society. What do you say to that?
Well, one of the impacts of colonisation around the world has been the impoverishment of a particular community of people who were there prior to colonisation, and that's certainly the case in Australia, New Zealand, Canada. So whilst colonisation per se is something that happened historically, we're still feeling impacts. So how do we ameliorate that? We address them fairly, and so I think that he's right, that providing healthcare on the basis of need is important, particularly when Māori are more likely to need that because of the loss of our land. I mean, he finished by saying we can't fix what happened 200 years ago. Well, we can fix what happened 165 years ago when millions of acres of Māori land was taken illegally. We could maybe try giving some of it back.
Or treaty settlements.
Well, that's what treaty settlements were about, unfortunately.
Well, are about, right? They're still happening.
I mean, what, 2.7 billion has been returned to Māori over the last 30 years. That's less than what's just been given.
A drop in the ocean.
It's a drop in the ocean.
Okay, fair enough. So there is a need, obviously, that needs to be addressed. Why does it need to be addressed on the basis of race? Why can we not target the money on the basis of need? And if what you're saying is true, that Māori do have a greater need, then they will feel the benefits of that. And
I agree with you. And I mean, let's not forget, Māori are not a race. That was just a word we used to describe ourselves when foreigners arrived. That was, we're normal, you're different. Yeah. So we're not a race, and it's not about race, it's about need, and it's about righting wrongs in our history, because as many learn, if we don't address the problems of the past, then we simply carry them with us. And so that need that we have in Māori communities, that poverty, comes from well over 100 years of governments targeting us, and that's still happening now.
So do you, so do you almost agree with the government's approach then on need, not race?
I think any sane person must do. If you find the most needy community, and if it happens to be people who live in rural areas or people who are poor or people who have a history of substance abuse, then fix those problems based on need. But do that in a very fair and even way. When you have a government that says we're going to take away that which is addressing the need, the health authority, but we're going to give it here because it suits our ideology ideological needs to fund charter schools, then what you're seeing is a mismatch between what could be a more universal approach to addressing need.
The difference, David Seymour would argue, between charter schools and two separate funding agencies for health, which is what the Māori Health Authority was, is that when it comes to charter schools, you can set one up for, I mean, if you're interested in, I don't know, Play-Doh, you could have a Play-Doh school. Do you know what I mean? It's not specifically for a particular race. It's just that Māori have actually benefited quite well from the charter school system.
And that's wonderful, and I'm very proud of that, and I'm very happy about that. I guess what I want to be able to stress is the fact that if we're going to, as a nation, really grow, then addressing inequities of the past, whatever they may be, is going to be an important part of how we move forward. And I think for many years we've been a world-class example of a new settler country, which is what we are, addressing inequities of the past in dealing with its Indigenous population. We've been held up as a poster child by many other countries, and I'd like to see that continue.
Yeah. Is it inequities of the past, or is it just inequities? Do you know what I mean? Does the fact we keep referencing the colonisation kind of distort the whole argument? I mean, I don't think anyone, actually you and David Seymour both agree there is need and that you should address it on the basis of need. So what are we even talking about?
I guess my concern is there's a sort of revisionist idea to somehow expunge what were very much sins of the past, you know, invasions of communities, massacres, those kinds of things. If we look to them and say, this is a part of who and what we were, but we've moved on and we've learned how to resolve it, I think we become a stronger country than if we just say, no, we're not going to. We're going to ignore it.
So this is more of a conversation than a policy thing.
I think that's what we've been in for the last 185 years, and that's why we're so good at it.
Ella, good to have you on the program, as always.